A young researcher is thrown against the wall so hard that his spine breaks. A man turned into a scarecrow. A woman unmoored from gravity. A man losing a vital component of his brain. All these poisoned prizes can be yours if you have your hands on a certain special object. The thief is confused, to say the least, at the sight before him. It isn't exactly what he has been expecting to find on his travel to the Forgotten Cave. The strange object is displayed on an altar, with a beam emanating from somewhere above, shining a bright column of moonlight onto it. This must be the treasure that he was sent here for. But what was this strange treasure? He's still aching all over from his long journey, many days and nights spent crossing the desert just to reach his destination. All around the cavern are precious stones and gold coins, jewelry and riches beyond the thief's wildest dreams, and it's all his for the taking, just as long as he fulfills his promise to the strange, decrepit old man he met at the entrance of the cave. The thief steps closer to the altar and examines the object the old man told him to recover. Upon hearing the word lamp, the thief had been picturing an ornate oil jug with a handle and spout, not this thing. The thief had never seen an object quite like it. It's a tall, thin neck that winds upwards from a flat, circular base. The top looks like the hem of a dress, but far smaller and made from green glass. It's a lamp, all right, but not as this thief would know it. He lifts it up to get a closer look and notices something, an empty space beneath the stained glass lampshade. It looks like there's a part missing. Nearby, he comes across another curiosity, a rounded, almost perfect sphere of glass with an elongated protrusion terminating in a metal connector. It seems like it would be the perfect fit for the vacant port on the lamp. So, figuring out how to affix the two, the thief attaches the light bulb to the lamp. To his surprise, the bulb begins to glow a light blue. Cautiously, he places it back down and backs away, uncertain about what is about to happen next. A sudden plume of blue smoke erupts from the lamp, and the thief ducks for cover, thinking the object has exploded. But there's no loud sound, no flames, and this prompts him to peek out from his hiding place to see a mysterious figure emerging from the cloud. It looks to be an older man, hovering above the ground, not legs, but a tail of the same smoke as the rest of his body. Now the thief recognizes what's going on. He's grown up with stories of creatures almost exactly like this one, and it fills him with a rush of excitement. It's a genie. He can remember as clear as day tales about genies. They are mystical wish-givers, imprisoned within lamps and then bound to the person who discovers them. Once it emerges from its slumber, a genie will then offer whoever freed it 3 wishes.
Hey, you there. You gonna hide all night? Come on, kid, let's get this over with. What'll it be?
The genie asks rather brashly. The thief approaches the smoky, translucent figure and immediately knows exactly what to do. He's already thought of exactly what to ask for, the wish that can free him from his life of stealing and poverty. "Genie, I wish for you to make me rich," he says. As soon as he's finished his sentence, the genie vanishes, leaving the thief confused. Surely he still had another 2 wishes. He's startled as the light bulb he had affixed to the lamp suddenly explodes, for real this time, with a spark and a shower of small glass shards. Before the thief can so much as call for the genie to return and demand that it explain itself, he feels a sickly churning in his stomach. Something is very, very wrong. After a few short moments of violent and painful sickness, the thief lays dead on the floor of the cavern. If one from a more advanced period of history were to examine him, they'd find the thief's body exposed to an extremely large overdose of vitamin C, enough to kill him. The genie had made him rich. It just goes to show the old warning to be careful what you wish for is always applicable, especially when you find yourself making a wish from SCP-4035. Although it might look like an unassuming table lamp from the outside, within it stored an ancient entity who also happens to be wildly unpredictable, and a bit of a jerk, to be completely honest. Anyone examining SCP-4035 will notice the first odd thing about it fairly quickly. The lamp itself is rather unremarkable, composed of a simple iron base with a conical lampshade above. Its pattern-stained glass sports a number of shades of green, and overall, it looks like the type of lamp you might find at a grandparent's house, or a distant elderly relative who always tells you just how much you've grown when you visit every 5 to 10 years and whose home decor hasn't changed since the mid-1970s. But the first of SCP-4035's many strange properties is that it doesn't actually seem to work. Closer inspection of the lamp itself will reveal that it doesn't actually have any electrical components whatsoever. There's no wiring running through it, no cable leading to a plug that can be affixed to a wall socket, no switch, nothing. Except for a standard light bulb socket. So naturally, anyone coming across this seemingly useless table lamp will feel compelled to find a light bulb and see if the thing actually works. That's when things get even stranger. Light bulbs placed into SCP-4035 will indeed illuminate, despite the lack of electricity powering the lamp. There won't appear to be anything unusual about its functionality at first, other than the bulbs inserted into SCP-4035 will produce a blue-tinted light. But surely that's just because of its ornate stained glass lampshade, right? Wrong. Shortly after placing a light bulb within SCP-4035, that's when he emerges. Who is he? Well, the Foundation knows him as SCP-4035-1, but for the sake of brevity, let's just call him the Genie. Emerging from the lamp will be an entity that seems to be gaseous in its composition, lacking a tangible, physical form, and instead appearing to be incorporeal, almost like a ghost, or a man made of vapors. This being has been described as having the characteristics of a middle-aged, balding man, looking to be somewhere between his 40s and 50s. Whenever he appears, the Genie always looks the same, always sporting a patchy brown suit coat. Beneath, however, he has no visible legs, and in their place is a cloud of blue gas that emanates from the lower body of SCP-4035-1. As soon as SCP-4035-1 appears, he will strike up a conversation with whoever placed a light bulb in the lamp that contains him. Now, you might be forgiven for, perhaps, predicting how the next interaction typically plays out. After all, you've seen Aladdin. A genie appears and offers to grant the person who discovered its lamp 3 wishes. However, the person making the wishes has to be very careful with how they word their requests to the magical entity. One wrong word, and they might find themselves suffering some unforeseen consequences. Or perhaps it unfolds like other myths and fables involving genies. The wishes are granted, but they come at a terrible, maybe even fatal, price. Well, you'd be almost right to expect something like that from this genie, but let's just say that SCP-4035-1 doesn't exactly enjoy doing things by the book. The genie introduces itself, usually under some randomly selected false name. Some favorites of his during past encounters have included Bobby, Spiff, Danny Fry, and Josephi Krakowski. Now you can see why just calling him the Genie is a lot simpler. Anyway, after he manifests, SCP-4035-1 won't offer 3 wishes, but instead offers to sell a product to whoever placed a light bulb in SCP-4035. Attempts to ask the Genie to elaborate on the product being offered are usually met with an evasive response and little detail being revealed. Once the person or subject talking to SCP-4035-1 responds, the Genie then, in effect, grants their wish. They can just be trying to converse with the entity, but it will regard even a completely unrelated verbal response as an answer. The subjects typically receive a biological modification or other anomalous ability that directly relates to what they said to the Genie, and we do mean directly. Once again, you might be forgiven for expecting that being granted supernatural powers by a magical genie would be a fun experience. After all, who doesn't want anomalous abilities? But be warned, the abilities SCP-4035-1 hands out usually fit the description of lackluster and disappointing. Why? Well, because typically, the anomalous modifications the Genie makes are highly detrimental to the subject in question. You see, SCP-4035-1 has a habit of taking things extremely literally, almost to a pedantic extent, intentionally misinterpreting and leaving any who accidentally make a wish with it harmful changes to their minds and bodies. And like most genies from mythology, this one doesn't undo the wishes that it grants. After bestowing someone with abilities that usually leave them in agony or distress, the Genie disappears back into SCP-4035, causing the light bulb inside to violently explode. Should someone attempt to replace it and get the Genie to reverse whatever horrific change it has made, its voice will emanate from the lamp and yell,
"Sorry, kid, no refunds."
But how bad could these abilities possibly be? Well, to find out the answer, You only have to take a look at a select few of the numerous tests the SCP Foundation has done involving SCP-4035. Dr. Bannock, at one point in time, is assigned to be the head researcher in charge of conducting experiments on SCP-4035. The approach he takes is sending members of disposable D-Class personnel to interact with the lamp and Genie, then record the results. The first test unfolds as follows. The subject, a D-Class with the designation number D4088, is sent into the containment chamber that houses SCP-4035. Dr. Bannock instructs him to place a light bulb in the socket and request telepathic abilities from SCP-4035-1. However, as the Genie emerges, its sudden presence startles the D-Class, and he makes an expletive exclamation that we won't repeat. It was words to the effect of, "What the heck is this?" As a result, the Genie grants D4088 an ability that relates to the sentence he said, and to call it particularly unpleasant might be something of an understatement. You see, because of a certain word the D-Class had used, the Genie gives him the ability to identify the chemical composition of what we'll refer to as waste. The fact that he can even identify what kind of creature said waste comes from does little to make D4088 happy with his newfound power. Dr. Bannock is forced to refine his experimentation strategy following this bungled first attempt. In the lead-up to the second test, he informs the next D-Class candidate of what exactly they will be facing when they enter the chamber, so as not to be caught by surprise at the sight of the Genie. As a result, the second D-Class subject repeats the process of activating SCP-4035 and calmly repeats the request for telepathic abilities that he's been told to ask for. "I'd like to be able to read minds." Unfortunately, his wording means things haven't exactly gone according to plan. Testing with this subject reveals he hasn't developed any telepathic abilities. Disappointed, Dr. Bannock has the subject released back into Foundation incarceration alongside his fellow D-Class prisoners. However, several weeks pass, and it soon becomes apparent what ability this inmate has been granted. He encounters another D-Class, one of many pulled from maximum security prisons around the globe. This particular inmate has a tattoo on his forehead of a few words in Chinese. However, to the former test subject, these phrases appear to have been translated to English and read, "Cuban butter mustache." When he reveals the mistake made by his fellow inmate's tattoo artist, the subject is attacked and beaten up. He had, however, gained the ability to read minds. He can understand any form of writing on the forehead of a living being. A little time passes, and Dr. Bannock finds himself still struggling to get SCP-4035-1 to bestow any worthwhile abilities to test subjects. The Genie just seems to take everything far too literally, interpreting every wish with no regard for normal speech and colloquialisms, even disregarding the safety of the person making the wish. Dr. Bannock conducts yet another test, sending a member of D-Class to speak with the Genie and telling him to wish for muscle regeneration. The D-Class places the request with SCP-4035-1 seemingly without issue. However, then comes the next part, testing whether this new anomalous ability actually works the way Dr. Bannock intends. The subject of this latest experiment is intentionally injured. As this happens, his body appears to rapidly change. His muscular system swells up and multiplies, increasing from its original size. A successful test, right? Well, it would be, if the rapid muscle regeneration actually stopped. Before long, the D-Class test subject's muscle tissue is almost 250% bigger than its original size, making it much bigger than the rest of his body too. The subject is clearly highly distressed, although fortunately, this doesn't continue for long. Unfortunately, that's because his body can't function normally with this new rapid change, and as a result, the D-Class subject's vital signs stop after 3 short seconds. Getting more and more frustrated with the disastrous outcomes, Dr. Bannock makes the decision to simplify the requests made to the Genie. Surely it can't misinterpret one word, can it? The next test that Bannock conducts sees yet another unwitting member of D-Class, D1899, entering the containment chamber and placing a light bulb within SCP-4035, just like her predecessors have done. She follows her instructions, and as the Genie appears, she asks for one thing: flight. A short while later, the Genie once again vanishes and leaves D1899 with her wish. She has instantly become unaffected by the Earth's gravitational pull like normal. Within seconds, she is floating above the ground, as if experiencing the zero gravity of traveling in outer space. That certainly sounds idyllic, doesn't it? After all, who doesn't wish they could fly? To be granted the unique opportunity to view the majesty of the world from high above. Just one problem, though. Getting back down. D-1899 quickly realizes, as does an agitated Dr. Bannock, that she isn't in control of her newfound flying abilities. She can't alter her direction or return back down to ground level at will. She's stuck, floating in the air, only able to affect her trajectory by propelling herself off of solid structures. The results of SCP-4035 tests continue to be somewhat undesirable, to say the least. An interaction with the Genie that begins with the phrase, hey man, causes the D-Class who spoke to be suddenly replaced with a crude scarecrow. When another subject makes a wish for a new life, they die almost instantly, only for moments later, one of the Foundation's researchers to suddenly give birth to a baby with identical genetic makeup to the now deceased D-Class. Another test sees a member of D-Class personnel enter the containment chamber with the instruction to wish for whatever they can think of. Put on the spot, they're unsure what to request when the Genie appears, and instead, they only offer up the response, I don't know. Moments later, this subject falls into a catatonic state and eventually passes away. An autopsy of the subject's body reveals that their hippocampus has been removed. Thanks to the Genie, they literally didn't know anything. Further testing with SCP-4035 is later carried out. However, it should be noted that the next instance of a recorded experiment with the Genie isn't one that was authorized by the SCP Foundation. Rather, hearing that there was a Genie being tested, junior researcher Jacobson decides to try and make his ultimate wish come true. He's never been all that lucky in love, and it's left the young Foundation researcher with a little insecurity. Nothing that a visit to SCP-4035-1 can't fix, surely. Despite not being authorized to use SCP-4035, junior researcher Jacobson approaches the lamp within its containment chamber. He then repeats the process to make SCP-4035-1 appear, and then requests that the Genie grant his wish. Make me more attractive? In an ideal world, this scenario wraps up with junior researcher Jacobson becoming more handsome by conventional standards, perhaps even improving his sense of insecurity as a result. But by now, you can probably guess, that isn't what happens at all. Instead, being as literal as ever, the Genie grants the young researcher's wish and makes him more attractive. Seconds later, as soon as the Genie has demanifested, Jacobson is suddenly flung across the containment chamber and smacked sharply against the solid wall. The sheer force of the impact gives the junior researcher a severe spinal fracture. Of course, this catches the attention of Foundation security, who bring junior researcher Jacobson to the on-site medical center. There, he is given a full analysis, and this reveals the extent of just how attractive the Genie has made him. Junior researcher Jacobson's epidermis, his outer layer of skin, has been given properties similar to that of a high-powered magnet. He has been magnetically attracted to the metallic walls of the containment chamber, resulting in a spinal injury that would claim his life only 2 hours later. The extensive testing with SCP-4035 is still ongoing, and as a result, the Foundation sees it fit to keep a large supply of light bulbs near the lamp's containment chamber. Dr. Bannock's research seems to indicate that while a person is in close proximity with SCP-4035, they are more likely to suffer a sudden and inexplicable speech problem. For example, the most common of these are parapraxis, commonly known as a Freudian slip, or ankyloglossia, which is a condition wherein the skin joining a person's tongue to the bottom of their mouth is shorter than usual, and this affects normal tongue movement, sometimes being called a tongue tie. Being closer to SCP-4035-1 increases the chances of suffering some form of unintended speech mistake by 68% when talking to the Genie. To cut a long story short, the Genie doesn't just intentionally and obtusely interpret everything literally, but also directly affects how clear a person will be while making their wish. As for exactly where SCP-4035 comes from, there's little information available. Some theories suggest it might well be an actual mythological Genie who is just tired of spending so many centuries in the business of granting wishes for mortals. After all, imagine you get trapped in a desk lamp for all eternity and have to magically fulfill the requests of anyone that comes across you. Living through that for so long is liable to make a Genie bitter and petty. Then again, perhaps the Genie isn't even really a genuine Genie. It doesn't inhabit an oil lamp, but instead a broken table lamp. Maybe it's a and instead of granting wishes in the way they're intended, it misinterprets and takes things too literally, leaving the poor fools who thought they'd be blessed with supernatural powers to deal with the consequences. But perhaps that's the point. If nothing else, the genie residing in SCP-4035 serves as a reminder of that important lesson: to be careful what you wish for. A woman wakes up on a bright sunny morning in Midland, Texas. It's her day off, and she decides she's going to use the time to take care of all the lingering errands she'd been putting off for far too long. She gets dressed, washes her hair, and prepares to pour herself a nice bowl of cereal. But when she opens the refrigerator, she finds there's no milk. She'll need to see to that immediately. She steps out of her front door and notices a paper on her doormat. She bends down to pick up the pamphlet, which advertises a new supermarket opening in town. And what do you know? There's a coupon for milk attached. What a stroke of good luck. The woman makes her way into town, eager to check out the new grocery store. She parks her car and approaches the building, when suddenly a stranger is standing right in front of her, carrying a plate of what appear to be free samples. He's dressed like a supermarket employee, but he's built like a soldier, complete with a military crew cut. He smiles and tells her that he actually works for a rival store, and points at a building across the street. He's positive that whatever she thinks she can get at this store, she can instead get at the one across the street for a lower cost and higher quality. She can't help but notice the almost unsettling desperation in the salesman's face. Something about his spiel makes her feel like she's in danger. She politely declines his offer, but he continues pitching deals and bargains at her as she makes her way into the safety of the new supermarket. The clean tiles below and the buzzing fluorescent lights above seem so familiar, yet also strangely alien to her. Something about this place is just wrong. But she needs the milk, so she walks down the aisles, deeper into the store. She hears strange noises and looks over her shoulder. Was the bread aisle always behind her? She could have sworn she just came out of the meat and fish section. Where did they even keep the milk in this place? Every so often, there's a strange noise somewhere in the store around her. It sounds almost like footsteps, but not quite. More like claws tapping on the tiles. Is she alone in here? Come to think of it, she can't quite remember seeing anyone else since she came in. There's something so profoundly off about this place, but she just can't put her finger on what. She takes a step forward, and suddenly the floor gives way beneath her. The tiles separate with a whir of mechanized gears as a trapdoor opens up. In an instant, she's tumbling down into darkness. As she falls, she can see the white light beaming in from above illuminate the edge of something metal and razor sharp. In the store above, the sound of a scream can be heard, and a soft squish of metal-piercing flesh, followed by the gurgle of blood, and then the trapdoor closes. A tinny voice over the PA system comes on and says, "Clean up on aisle 6?" The woman is never seen again after that. What superficially appears to be an independent supermarket in Midland, Texas, actually contains a number of strange and often deadly paranormal secrets, and that doesn't even stop it from being a successful and popular supermarket. But the weirdest part of all? It's all perfectly legal, thank you very much. Welcome to Yeah, We're Totally Going to Sell You This, or as it's known to the SCP Foundation, SCP-4703. The primary anomalous effects surrounding SCP-4703 affect not its customers, but the very legality of its own existence and operations. The anomalies shift laws to make everything that goes on inside legal, no matter how unethical or dangerous. It also often reshapes laws to protect its own interests from outsiders, and anyone who breaks these laws may experience spontaneous attacks from violent animals, the most common of which are vicious lions. Here are a handful of the unethical and dangerous, yet perfectly legal, thank you very much, things that go on within the confines of SCP-4703. The stacks of shelves are mounted on powerful pneumatic actuators that seem to shift and spin of their own accord. While this has the intention of keeping the store varied and stopping customers from leaving, it more often causes serious injury with its sudden movements. Occasionally, these sets of shelves will collide, crushing whatever is stuck between them. If a child becomes lost or separated from their parents while they're inside the store, the child is forcibly detained, and the parent or parents can only get their child back by either paying an upfront cost of $47.67 in cash, or submitting to have their eyebrows permanently removed with laser follicle surgery. There are also several dozen hidden trapdoor mechanisms beneath the floor in various parts of the building, each one triggered by some strange and arbitrary condition, such as saying the word Wednesday, or by not saying the word Wednesday. The triggers are updated each day and displayed on the store's website in several dead languages: including Latin, Koine Greek, Phoenician, and Punic. Each of these trapdoors drops into deep shafts filled with some kind of hazard, such as spikes, glitter, or poisonous snakes. Yes, that's poisonous, not venomous. The snakes are only dangerous when eaten, but victims have reported that they seem incredibly appealing, which makes resisting them rather difficult. A section on the far side of the store is marked "Starving for Savings" and "Discounts ad Bestias," where all the products are fenced off and also marked down by 70% or more. However, the products are guarded by no less than 15 hungry lions. Store-branded fishing rods, telescopic grabbing mechanisms, and drones are available to rent for the explicit purpose of retrieving items remotely, although this will result in far higher costs, so you will have to brave the lions in order to attain those incredible deals. There's also a roughly 5% chance that after checkout, your cashier will ask you to kiss them on the lips. If you refuse, they'll burn your purchases in front of you, and you won't receive a refund. If you do kiss them, there's a 1 in 3 chance that the cashier will have an anomalous toxin on their lips that will cause you to drop dead instantly. And every day, at an arbitrary time between the hours of 3 p.m. and closing time, the lions will be released from the discount section to roam the store, and only 2 checkout lines will remain open. All items will be free during this period, but they must be scanned one by one. The SCP Foundation is currently exploring links between SCP-4703 and 2 other anomalies like SCP-2030 and SCP-1459, the former being the cursed hidden camera show Laugh is Fun, and the latter being a nightmarish vending machine that murders puppies and dispenses a variety of cookies in exchange. So then, if it is so dangerous, why doesn't the SCP Foundation simply block access to "yeah, we're totally going to sell you this"? Unfortunately, thanks to the anomalous legal effect created by SCP-4703, the Foundation can't just storm in or physically contain the building, so instead, they attempt to divert as many customers away from 4703 as possible. To do this, the Foundation has started a rival supermarket across the street, named Super Competitive Prices LLC. Sheldon M. Katz Esquire is an SCP Foundation lawyer and bureaucromancer, a thaumatologist skilled in the art of interfacing with anomalously bureaucratic SCPs, and he is spearheading the Foundation legal team's efforts into combating SCP-4703. Untangling the complex web of legality around SCP-4703 is a full-time job after all, and in the following memo, Mr. Katz did all he could to articulate the sheer enormity of the problem they're dealing with. He writes, "Counteraction of SCP-4703's legal anomalies is a top-level priority for our department, and we are making every effort to resolve the matter in a way which minimizes loss of life and economic detriment. We have received a significant number of inquiries regarding the mechanism of SCP-4703's indisputable legality. Unfortunately, there are no easy answers. Law is a human concept. It exists on paper because we write it down. It exists in practice because we enforce it. Generally, we interpret and exercise the law through the scrutiny of semantics, intent, and precedent. Yet, bureaucratic hazards such as SCP-4703 are not necessarily predicated on such things. In fact, the law as most know it has very little to do with the matter. While it's not a perfect comparison, one could say that baseline law is to anomalous law as arithmetic is to algebra. Both are recognized as mathematics, but the latter is more abstract. Imagine that Timmy and Sally each have 2 apples. If Timmy gives Sally his apples, then Sally should end up with 4. But she doesn't. She has 10. How can this be? Sally recounts the apples and reenacts the scenario over and over, but there is no mistake. 2 and 2 make 10. It is an incontrovertible fact. You see, even if anomalies are irrational, they are factual, and it is essential that one accepts this if they wish to develop a countervailing methodology. Once Sally accepts that her 4 apples have become 10, she reevaluates her radix and decides to recount the apples in base 4. Suddenly, the 10 apples are 10 apples. 10 is 4 in base 4, which is the appropriate number of apples. Eureka! Sally collects another 4 apples, bringing the total to 20, which is 20, which is 8, which confirms that her new paradigm aligns with the abnormality. Form follows function according to the function of the form, and at last, everything makes sense. Except none of it does, really. A well-behaved reality oughtn't conflate the concrete with the abstract. If you initially perceived a countable sum of 10 apples in base 10, then the equivalent number of apples in base 4 should be 22, since it stands to reason that changing your subjective view of an outcome oughtn't alter the physical materials in the equation. However, we live in a very naughty reality which may, on a whim, allow a young girl to wield apples unbeholden to thermodynamics. This explanation is inadequate, of course,
but hopefully it goes a small way toward helping you understand why the legal department is currently occupied with a comprehensive redrafting of Texas corporate law in a quaternary semiological system. This in itself would be an exceptional feat, even for the most skilled of bureaucromancers, and it is further compounded by the necessary incorporation of contingency clauses against the self-aware fact patterns that keep legitimizing rabid lions into existence inside my goddamn bathroom. We are grateful to you, our valued colleagues, for your patience and cooperation as we work together toward a solution. The Foundation is currently conducting a three-pronged attack against the forces of SCP-4703, the first being the Super Competitive Prices LLC competitive store. The second is the tireless efforts of Mr. Katz and his team against the trifling legal issues of SCP-4703, and the third is outright infiltration and espionage. Of course, when you're going behind enemy lines, it's crucial that the proper operative is selected for the job. It can't just be anyone dropped into a high-pressure situation like this, especially considering the rapidly evolving nature of SCP-4703's conditions. The SCP Foundation was more than aware that they might only get one shot at getting one of their own in and out of the building. For this task, they selected Field Agent Felicity Blandina, codename Karen of Justice. Blandina was uniquely qualified for a job like this. In personality tests conducted on all Foundation agents to test loyalty, they consistently found Blandina to be one of the most obtuse and shameless agents on the Foundation payroll. During group lunches with other staff members, she has been reported numerous times sending meals back to the kitchen when she felt they were unsatisfactory. And Foundation cyber analysts have detected multiple posts on various social media networks made by her, directly tagging and criticizing brands that provided products or services she perceived as being subpar. While these qualities made her a terror to the customer service staff in her local area, they made her the ideal candidate for bypassing the bureaucratic stronghold of SCP-4703. If anyone could do it, it would be Field Agent Felicity Blandina. She was sent into the building with an expired coupon under the pretense of being an unhappy customer. She spoke to a sales assistant inside the store named Daniel Paulson, who explained to her that her coupon was denied because it was only applicable when the recipient submitted to ritual castration performed by the SCP-4703 staff. Seeing as Agent Blandina didn't have the necessary equipment to undergo such a procedure, Paulson generously offered to provide her with a free surgery to have the proper parts attached, though finding a suitable donor would likely take several months. Agent Blandina, following her well-trained Foundation directives, could not be assuaged by the bargain. Instead, she pressed on, first guilt-tripping him with sob stories about her children, then her lifelong struggles with astigmatism, and even threatening Paulson with physical violence. Eventually, she delivered the true coup de grace, demanding to speak to the manager. Showing clear reluctance, Paulson agreed and led Agent Blandina to a door near the front of the store. It opened up into an unlit staircase that descended into the darkness below. At the bottom, they found a break room that appeared similar to a bunkhouse in a prisoner of war camp, containing hammock after hammock filled with uncomfortable sleeping employees. Paulson informed Agent Blandina that some of the people who work at the store were once normal civilians who'd been exploited with a number of legal loopholes, and now lived inside the store full-time. Some, for example, had stayed in past closing time, which had resulted in them becoming store property for a minimum of a year. Paulson himself had entered a raffle for an abs transplant, and instead won servitude at SCP-4703, which he couldn't legally turn down thanks to the powerful anomalous laws of the store. As Paulson and Agent Blandina ventured deeper into the bowels of the staff area, they passed 11 unmarked doors, before finally stopping in front of the 12th and last one. She opened the door and discovered shelves and stacked boxes within. Agent Blandina expressed incredulity at the idea that the store's manager would be kept inside of a supply closet in the basement, but Paulson insisted that this was indeed the manager's office, and as he did, he pulled a string connected to the ceiling. This caused a wall of boxes to split down the middle like a secret doorway, revealing a large executive chair facing the wall on the other side of the room. Still maintaining the cover story that she just wanted a discount, Agent Blandina pressed on and approached the chair. She spun it around to get a better look at the manager and found herself standing in front of a desiccated corpse with no eyes and all of his teeth pulled out, his mouth wrenched open in a permanent, silent scream of terror. Paulson identified this man as Mr. Venatio Haruspice, the manager of SCP-4703. Paulson would have told Agent Blandina that his boss was a corpse earlier, but to do so was against the rules. Agent Blandina sighed and grumbled, "I feel like I should have expected this." Paulson assured Agent Blandina that she could still make her complaint, though, and the owner of the store would eventually hear it. As Paulson understood it, the body known as the manager acted almost like a kind of telephone, sending messages through to the owner. The owner would then reply through faxed messages hidden inside the cereal boxes that acted as the only food source of the staff trapped within. This Kafka-esque nightmare just kept getting worse and worse, but Agent Blandina refused to give up that easily. Agent Blandina asked him to explain the exact nature of the manager's condition to her. Paulson replied, "I know that he's legally our manager. I know that he's, well, what he is. I know that one of us always has to kiss him goodnight at closing time. I know that if we tell him something, the owner knows, but the owner seems to know everything that happens here anyway, so I can't be certain that's related. What else? I know that he's empty, or hollow, actually. Hollow's probably a better word." Agent Blandina leaned in a little further to see what exactly Paulson meant by that, only to make a horrifying discovery. The manager wasn't a whole corpse. He was just desiccated skin, a husk somehow propped up into the shape of a corpse. When Agent Blandina asked why Paulson specified hollow and not empty, he told her that it was because a noise was sometimes heard emanating from within the skin husk. Agent Blandina wisely refused to put her ear anywhere near the manager's gaping, toothless mouth, and instead fed the hidden microphone she had been wearing down into the husk's throat. Before Paulson had time to remark on the strangeness of this, sirens and alarms began going off all around them. Paulson began to panic, yelling that the lions were incoming, and the duo needed to move quickly to get out of harm's way. Luckily, Agent Blandina was able to escape with only minor injuries, but shortly after her escape, SCP-4703's legality was once again restructured to make it illegal for non-employees to enter the employee-only areas. The audio that Agent Blandina recorded inside the body of the manager was also analyzed by experts at the Foundation, and they discovered that, when sped up by 75%, the sound was indistinguishable from human laughter. Due to the highly strange nature of this anomaly and its containment procedures, even by SCP Foundation standards, the classes and designations applied to SCP-4703 are equally strange and complex. Knowledge of the file and the anomaly itself is relatively low tier, with restricted Level 2 access permissions. Due to the immense difficulty in keeping SCP-4703 hidden or contained, thanks to its unique legal situation, it has been given the Object Class Keter. This, however, is where things get even stranger. The SCP-4703 store has a rare secondary object class, Truculent. This classification is likely to be unfamiliar to most, but it is used in the specific situation when an item is unpredictable and often transformative, and the containment measures around it must be consistently updated and evolved in order to meet its containment needs. It has the Level 3 or Kenic disruption class, meaning that it has a roughly medium potential to cause disruption, though this disruption is likely to be confined to a relatively local area. And finally, it has the Risk class Warning, meaning that it presents a high risk to all who interact with it, complete with the possibility of causing severe harm, including death. Though legally, due to a missive sent from the law firm working in association with SCP-4703, I am obliged to tell you that it's mainly because the bargains at "yeah, we're totally going to sell you this" are simply to die for, which is perfectly legal, thank you very much.
The ground rumbled. Not like thunder. No, this was more like something was angry. The young man's feet slapped against the earth, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts. Behind him was something enormous, something that shouldn't exist, but it did, and it was closing in. He didn't know exactly what it was, but it was hungry, and that was enough for him. He had heard the stories. Bigger than a mountain, faster than a lightning bolt, teeth like jagged rocks. He was running for his life. The trees blurred as he dashed through them, the predator's growls vibrating in his bones. No time to think, just run. Then he saw it up ahead, the cave, the dark, inviting mouth of the cave. The young man didn't hesitate. He dove inside, nearly tripping over his own feet, hands scraping against the cold rock as he shoved his body deeper into the darkness. Then, silence. For all of 2 seconds. Thud, thud, thud. The growls outside the cave grew louder. It was still there. The creature had followed him in. There was no escape. He pressed himself against the cold stone, trying to slow his breathing, praying for the predator to... what? Get tired? Forget about him? Then, there were voices.
Go, go!
Someone hissed.
Push the rock!
The young man's eyes widened. Oh no. It was the tribe. They had been following him, apparently. They weren't just watching from a distance, they were playing their part, and it looked like they were really into it. A woman, the leader of the group, appeared from behind a bush, arms flailing dramatically.
Seal it! Seal it!
She shouted, looking way too enthusiastic for someone trying to trap a massive beast. A man next to her tried pushing a rock twice his size. It barely budged.
Get off me!
He growled, trying to wrangle it with all the grace of a half-drunk bear.
I swear this thing was lighter at the last rehearsal.
One by one, the tribe emerged, looking like a confused parade of squirrels who'd just remembered they were supposed to be doing something important. They scurried out of the bushes, arms full of rocks that were nowhere near as big as they needed to be. The entire scene felt like a bad play. One guy rolled a rock that was comically small and got stuck under it. Another two bickered over a particularly large one, trying to shove it up a hill like it was a toddler at a water park.
More rocks,
Yelled a third, as if they were building a house, not sealing a death trap. Through all this chaos, the young man barely had the energy to protest. He'd been running for his life, only to end up helping these people. If this wasn't the weirdest moment of his life, he didn't know what was. Finally, after some truly embarrassing grunting, pushing, and a very inappropriate dance involving a boulder, the entrance was sealed. There it was, the cave entrance, blocked by rocks that could have been knocked over by a strong gust of wind.
Done!
One of them shouted, hands on his hips like he'd just won a race. The tribe paused, looking at their work. They had somehow sealed in the beast with rocks that could barely stop a rabbit, let alone a monster that could probably crush a tree with its tail.
Well,
the leader said, nodding.
That should do it. Safe, for now.
The young man, now thoroughly bewildered, slumped against the cave wall.
For now?
He croaked, and that's when they started to celebrate. They sang a little song, something that sounded like a goose being stepped on while being dragged through the mud. It wasn't a pleasant melody, but it was full of enthusiasm. A young woman grabbed a bunch of random flowers, tossing them onto the ground like she was handing out raffle prizes at a carnival.
Thank you for your sacrifice,
she called, as if he had volunteered for this. Another person, clearly too happy for someone who was supposed to be helping seal a cave of doom, started doing a strange little jig. Their feet shuffled side to side in a way that could only be described as prehistoric dad dance moves. The young man stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the bizarre series of events. His legs ached, his chest burned, and his fate? Well, it was sealed, all right. The predator was trapped. And the tribe? Well, they thought they were safe. Little did they know, the real beast was still inside, waiting, hungry, watching. But for now, the tribe was oblivious. They were too busy dancing, singing, and congratulating themselves for their successful trap. And somewhere in the dark, the young man let out a long, tired sigh. Was this really what passed for a victory? Yes. Yes, it was. Thousands of years later, the cave had become a part of something much larger, a palace no less. The mouth of the cave had been hidden, buried beneath the mighty palace of King Minos of Crete. If anyone knew the truth about what mythical thing laid below, no one bothered to say anything. But the labyrinth was real. The endless maze beneath the palace, its twisting paths carved into the stone, had a reputation, and it wasn't just the locals who feared it. Every 9 years, the people of Athens were required to send a grim tribute, a procession of 7 sons and 7 daughters, sacrificed to the beast that lived in the maze. The Minotaur, as the prehistoric creature had come to be called, was a terror that even King Minos himself could not control. He didn't have to. The tribute kept the beast fed, the people of Athens in line, and the king's power unquestioned. But one year, a wrinkle in the plan appeared. Theseus, son of King Aegeus of Athens, volunteered. He wasn't going to be just another tribute. No, he had something else in mind. He'd heard the stories. The Minotaur had been contained once, long ago, and Theseus believed that this time he could finish it off. Kill the beast, become a hero, and while the Greek gods watched, he would save Athens from the cruel demands of this Cretan king. When Theseus and the other tributes arrived on the island of Crete, they were met by a spectacle of grandeur and gold. The palace of King Minos stood tall, a monument to human ambition, while the labyrinth, dark and secretive, loomed beneath it. But Theseus wasn't concerned with the palace or the labyrinth's exterior. His mind was elsewhere, on Ariadne, the beautiful daughter of Minos. He saw her from the moment they landed, her eyes catching the sunlight, the perfect distraction. He knew what he had to do.
"You should help me,"
he whispered to her one evening at a dinner banquet.
"I can kill the beast, but I can't do it alone."
Ariadne raised an eyebrow, the slightest hint of curiosity in her eyes. "Why should I help you?" she asked, arms crossed, as if she already knew what was coming.
"Well,"
Theseus grinned, "because if you don't,
then I'll be stuck there forever. You don't want that, do you?
She scoffed, but the spark of interest was clear.
And why do you think you can kill the Minotaur?
Theseus flashed her a grin.
I'm born to be a hero.
She stared at him for a long moment, measuring him, and then shrugged.
All right, but if I help you, you have to come back and marry me, because my father will be really mad,
she said as she pulled a small ball of thread from her belt.
Oh, I will,
Theseus said confidently. Too confidently. He took the thread from her, understanding the plan. She would help him navigate the maze, but more than that, she would keep him alive. And so, with her help, Theseus ventured into the labyrinth. But let's get one thing straight. Theseus didn't kill the Minotaur. Oh no. According to the myth, that's how the story goes. Theseus is hailed as a hero who killed the beast and returned victorious, having overcome impossible odds. But that's not what really happened. What actually happened was a bit messier. The maze, like the tribe's dance, had its own rhythm, and as Theseus maneuvered through the twisting corridors, chasing the echo of his own footsteps, he realized the beast wasn't exactly what they said it was. Sure, it was terrifying, huge, and, yes, covered in muscle and fury, but it wasn't invincible. It wasn't unbeatable. It was, however, trappable. In the heart of the maze, the Minotaur lunged at him, teeth snapping, claws slashing through the air, and Theseus did the only thing he could think of. He ran. Fast. Using the thread Ariadne gave him, he darted through the maze, winding his way back and forth, weaving the string behind him like a breadcrumb trail. He could hear the beast following, but the closer he got to the exit, the less he cared about whether or not the Minotaur was still behind him. He'd made it. He was out. Ariadne waited at the entrance, and as soon as Theseus stepped into the light, he threw his arms up in triumph.
I did it, he shouted. I killed the Minotaur.
Ariadne looked at him, confused. You... what?
I killed it,
Theseus said again, more forcefully this time. He was sure he had. In the distance, there was a growl, low, rumbling. The beast was still alive, still waiting. Ariadne didn't say anything. She just stared at him for a long time. But Theseus had already started to walk away, claiming his mythical hero's victory. Ariadne watched him go, the ball of thread dangling loosely in her hands. She had helped him, yes, but she knew the truth. There had never been a hero here. A few more 1,000 years later, Crete, its ancient ruins now barely recognizable, had been pummeled by the fury of Nazi planes. But where buildings fell, something else rose. Discovery. Beneath the wreckage of the ancient Minoan palace, something had been waiting. It had been waiting for a long time. A group of Nazi soldiers scoured the rubble of the once great palace searching for loot. They weren't interested in ruins or history. No, they had been sent to collect anything that could be sold. Ancient Greek treasures? Perfect. Roman artifacts? Even better. But when one soldier knocked over a pile of broken stone, something caught his eye. It was an oddly shaped stone slab, embedded into the earth, covered in debris. It was like it had been forgotten, or perhaps hidden.
Hey, look at this!
He shouted, pulling at the stone with an eager grunt. The others rushed over. They had all been waiting for a lucky find like this. One of them, a bit too eager, grabbed a pickaxe and started hacking at the slab. After a few strikes, it cracked. The soldiers looked at each other. This wasn't just a tomb. No, this was a big one, the kind of tomb you don't find every day. The door was massive, thick stone and etched with strange carvings.
Should we open it?
One soldier asked, his voice sounding more like a question than a command.
Why not? We've come this far.
The Nazi officer in charge muttered, grinning. The entrance creaked open, revealing what appeared to be nothing but darkness. The soldiers stared at each other, unsure of what to make of it. One by one, they shuffled inside, expecting gold, maybe jewels, but definitely not whatever waited in the shadows. Inside, the space seemed far too big for the entrance, stretching endlessly, like the stone tomb was a portal to a place far beyond their expectations. The walls closed in around them. It was alive with a strange, anomalous energy, but they kept going. What else was there to do? They'd come this far.
Find the treasure,
the officer snapped,
and make it quick.
As they pushed forward, their flashlights flickered, their hearts raced. It was only moments before one of them at the front screamed. A horrific, guttural roar echoed from somewhere deep in the maze. His body was gone, swallowed by the darkness. The rest of the soldiers froze, the air thick with fear. But the officer wasn't about to give up that easily.
We're not leaving without something. Move out!
He shouted, his eyes hardening.
Whatever it is, we have guns.
One by one, the soldiers continued to venture into the labyrinth, their breaths heavy, their steps unsure. They didn't know it yet, but they had just stepped into something that didn't follow the laws of nature. Only one man made it back to the entrance alive. He staggered out, his face pale, eyes wide with terror. In his hand, he clutched ancient gold jewelry, but there was no pride in his grip, only raw fear. The others were nowhere to be seen.
What happened?
One soldier asked, his voice barely a whisper.
There's something in there.
The man said, voice trembling.
A beast. It's not like anything we've seen. It's still in there, waiting. Don't.
His voice cracked.
Don't go back in.
The officer looked at him like he had just heard a joke.
You're telling me there's a beast?
He laughed, more to himself than anyone else.
I don't know what you saw, but there's treasure in there. And we're getting it.
The survivor shook his head. The Nazi soldier's smile faded. He pulled out his pistol, aiming it at the soldier.
You're going back in,
he said, his voice low and dangerous. The soldier froze, his body trembling.
I won't. You can't make me.
Without hesitation, the officer pulled the trigger. The body slumped to the ground, lifeless.
All right then,
the officer muttered, slipping the gun back into its holster. Clearly he was the one in charge now. He turned to the others.
Back up the tomb. We're taking this to England. There's a buyer. They've been paying top dollar for looted artifacts from Greece. And this thing,
he gestured to the dark entrance.
It's going to make us rich. They'll want it. We'll sell it. We'll be kings.
And just like that, the tomb, the maze, and the beast that lay in waiting was packed up and shipped off to England just like any other treasure. When the spoils of war arrived in England, they weren't just in crates marked fragile. No, they were delivered to the extravagant manor of a particularly wealthy English lord, a man who had spent his life collecting, no, curating, the finest treasures history had to offer. And now, with the war over, the spoils of conquest were his for the taking. Among his new acquisitions were priceless Parthenon sculptures, finely detailed pottery, and of course, the crown jewel, the tomb from the Minoan Palace in Crete. The tomb wasn't much to look at on the outside, just a plain stone box, really. But when the Lord opened it and peered inside, his eyes widened in disbelief. The space inside was vast. The whole thing was far bigger than it had any right to be. It didn't fit. It was like opening a cupboard and finding a whole new world inside. Naturally, the Lord wasn't about to dive into this mystery without a bit of flair. This, he decided, required a proper crew. So he hired the best and brightest, electricians, builders, plumbers, no more of this amateur nonsense. He was a man of taste. He had grand plans for the tomb.
Let's make this a proper exploration,
he declared, gesturing toward the labyrinth inside.
We'll run electrical lines through it, light bulbs on the ceiling, a nice little chandelier in there for flair. It'll be a living space, you see. Very modern.
Naturally, he left the entrance door wide open. Who would dare steal from him? His home was practically a museum. He could trust the help. And so, the crew got to work. They strung wires through the corridors, placed light bulbs on the ceiling like they were installing lamps in a drawing room. They even found a curious little trickle of water running through the walls.
Ah,
the foreman said, rubbing his hands together with glee.
Nice bit of plumbing could make this even more impressive. Let's get some pipes in here, lads.
This way, the water wouldn't mess with the electrical equipment. He had the situation under control, or so he thought. As the crew began fitting the walls with pipes, the atmosphere grew thicker. The deeper they worked, the colder it seemed to get, but no one complained. After all, this was England, and it was winter. Everything was a bit chilly. That was when they heard it. A low rumble deep in the bowels of the tomb. Something growling. At first, they shrugged it off. Maybe it was the pipes shifting, the walls settling. But no, it grew louder. The foreman raised his head.
What in God's name was that?
His voice barely a whisper. The noise that erupted was enough to make the foreman drop his clipboard and run. The crew scrambled to pack up, but it was too late. The beast appeared, with claws and teeth, and a hunger no human could satisfy. Most of the crew didn't even make it to the door. By the time the last man bolted, the beast had already claimed its prize. One by one, the workers were picked off, their screams muffled by the thick stone walls. Only one man, a young carpenter, managed to escape. He ran, legs pumping, his heart a terrified rhythm in his chest. As he reached the entrance, he threw himself against the door, sealing it with all his might. The Lord, who had been sipping a brandy in the garden nearby, sauntered over, casually adjusting his waistcoat.
Well, what's the delay?
The carpenter, pale as a ghost, looked up at him with wild eyes.
There's a beast in there,
the carpenter gasped. The Lord raised an eyebrow, unfazed.
A beast, you say?
He asked, his tone laced with mockery.
Nonsense, it's just some animal. A wild boar. It's an old tomb, nothing more. A little superstition to keep us all on edge.
He didn't even blink before pulling a cigar from his coat pocket.
You,
he said to the carpenter,
will go back in there. I'm not paying good money for a superstition. You'll go in there and find the treasure. That's the job.
The carpenter tried to argue, but the Lord's gaze was cold. It was an order. The carpenter knew he didn't have a choice. With trembling hands, the carpenter unsealed the tomb, and the moment he opened it, the maze had changed again. The paths were different. The walls had moved, twisting like something alive. The carpenter froze.
No,
he whispered, stepping back.
I won't go in there again. It's not the same, it's...
Before he could finish, a gunshot rang out, cutting him off.
Pathetic,
the Lord muttered, watching the carpenter fall. He wasn't even angry, just annoyed, as if a servant had broken a vase. The next day, a fresh team of workers reluctantly unsealed the tomb again. The Lord, as usual, was lounging nearby, sipping his brandy, looking far too pleased with himself for someone so oblivious. He could already taste the gold, the treasure, the profit. The foreman opened the door. The new crew stepped in, their boots crunching on the gravel floor. They had a little more confidence, having heard the fun story from the carpenter, but they also didn't quite know what to expect. And when they looked inside, they were dumbfounded.
Blimey,
one of them muttered. The maze had completely changed. The walls that had been one way the day before were now another. The path the previous crew had carefully mapped out was gone. No light fixtures, no pipes. Everything they'd worked on, gone, vanished, like a dream that slipped away as soon as you woke up. The foreman scratched his head.
All right, lads, let's get to work.
And work they did. They put in new electrical wires, strung up more lighting fixtures, and even found that same curious trickle of water in the walls. But as soon as they began installing new pipes to siphon off the water, they heard it. That same deep, low, guttural growl. The workers were attacked. A few managed to survive and refused to enter the tomb again. And so it continued. The door to the tomb was opened again the next morning, and the morning after that, and every single time the maze had changed. Walls shifted, paths disappeared, new turns appeared where there had been none. It was as if the tomb, the maze, was alive, changing, adapting, moving. Every time the workers managed to run some basic electrical lines and fit a few light bulbs, they would get close to digging into the walls to put in the pipes, and then the beast would strike. Every single time. It never stopped. One or two survivors would crawl out, their faces ashen, their bodies cut up, half crazed, babbling the same story. And each time, the Lord, gritting his teeth, would order the workers back in. And each time, the same thing would happen. The beast, the maze, the shifting walls. Finally, after years of this, the Lord grew old and tired. Tired of the maze, the beast, and the stupid treasure hunt.
Enough is enough,
the Lord said to himself one evening, sitting by the fire, nursing a glass of brandy.
I've spent enough time and money.
The rest of the treasures, the statues, the pottery, the pieces of the Parthenon of the ancient Greek Acropolis, well, those would all go to a museum, of course. They would make a proper display of it. But the tomb, that cursed tomb, that wouldn't go to the museum. The Lord had grown too fond of the idea of getting rid of it to really hand it over. So he had the tomb packed into a metal crate and sent off to one of the poorest parts of London, a slum littered with the unhoused, the forgotten. Within days, the first disappearances were reported. At first, no one thought much of it. People went missing all the time in the slums. No one bothered to ask why. But then the numbers grew. The story started to spread. Entire groups of unhoused people vanishing overnight. And what was worse, no trace was left behind. No signs of struggle. No blood. They were just gone. Eventually, the Foundation was pinged and immediately retrieved this anomaly for further research. This supposed tomb is actually a real anomaly, and it's been classified by the Foundation as SCP-432. It's a steel storage cabinet, 2 meters tall, 1.2 meters wide, and 1 meter deep. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary, albeit worn, piece of storage furniture, with its matte green exterior covered in corrosion and scratches from years of exposure. The doors are simple, fitted with a slide bolt and a padlock for security. But when one opens the doors, they're not greeted by shelves or a storage space. Instead, they're faced with an extra-dimensional labyrinth. The space inside seems to defy the normal laws of physics, as it's far larger than the cabinet's external dimensions suggest. Inside is a maze of corridors made of heavily rusted steel. The corridors are lit by flickering household light bulbs, many of which are broken. Some walls are lined with steel pipes carrying cold water, though the source and destination of this water are completely unknown. It's drinkable, but it contains low oxygen and traces of iron oxide. The maze itself is impossible to map accurately. Every time the cabinet is closed and reopened, the entrance shifts to a completely different part of the labyrinth. No one can predict how the layout will change. As for those who venture inside, there have been no confirmed survivors, only remains. Some suggest starvation is the cause, but there's also evidence pointing to something far more dangerous, SCP-432-1, a large predatory entity that inhabits the maze. Its exact species is still unidentified, but it has been responsible for the deaths of multiple personnel. Now there's more to this anomaly than just the danger it presents. Technology, GPS units, phones, remote devices, fails after traveling about 20 meters into the maze. The only form of communication that still works are high-gain radio transmissions, though even those become heavily interfered with the deeper you go. Several expeditions have been sent into SCP-432 with D-Class personnel in an attempt to map the interior, but progress has been slow and dangerous. No further expeditions can be authorized without approval from at least 2 Level 4 personnel. What we do know is that the cabinet was constructed in the early 1950s, but the artifacts recovered from the maze have been traced back to much earlier periods. This suggests the maze, and perhaps the cabinet itself, may be linked to something far older, something not yet fully understood. As for containment, SCP-432 remains locked at all times. The key is secured in a nearby security station and is guarded by 3 Level 3 personnel. There are no additional special containment procedures needed, but we must be vigilant. There's much more we don't know about this anomaly, and it's essential we continue studying it while keeping it contained. The prisoner takes a brutal right hook to the face that lands with an uncomfortable crunch, laying him out along the freezing linoleum of the prison floor. He thinks about getting up, fighting back, maybe trying to wrestle the shiv out of one of their hands. Then the bottom of a sneaker collides with the side of his face, knocking his head against the ground with a sickening, hollow thud. Another kick collides with his gut a moment later, twisting his body into an oversized question mark. The question, in this case, is, how is he going to get out of this? And the answer is as simple as it is sad. He won't. There are 3 of them and only 1 of him. The other convicts lay into him with a volley of relentless punches and kicks as he writhes like an air-drowned fish on the ground, tearing muscles, cracking ribs.
Fight back, man, fight back!
One of them cackles.
You really just gonna take this?
Chimes in another, voice a medley of rage and amusement. The prisoner doesn't even know what he did to earn this. He didn't rat, didn't talk trash behind anybody's back, kept his head down, didn't look at anyone funny. Maybe he was just there. Maybe it was more about what they needed to do than who they needed to do it to. Then there's the big one, the one the other 2 follow. His tattooed face making him look like some ancient demon guarding a forbidden temple. He raises a foot and stomps down on the prisoner's ankle, leveraging all 300 pounds of him onto that one tender bone. The prisoner screams like he hasn't screamed since the day he was born. So loud, so shrill, so primal, you can't even hear his ankle shatter like cheap one-panel glass.
Get him up against the bars,
the big one says, voice deep and rumbling like a volcanic eruption.
Time to teach him a lesson.
His flunkies oblige, picking up the loose conglomerate of pain that is the prisoner's body and dragging him limply over to the barred door separating this hallway from the next. He tries to scream through broken teeth for the guards to come help him, but it won't do any good. Big Dog didn't get here by not being conscientious. He knows every guard on every shift and knows exactly what palms he needs to grease to make them look the other way. Nobody's coming to save this little punk. Nobody. Still, the prisoner tries to marshal the forces of whatever bones and muscles are still on speaking terms. He writhes, flails, and fights. He's going to make sure they don't get an easy win. That just earns him another clock around the jaw.
You just don't know when to quit, do you?
One of the flunkies says, as he produces a thin cord of fabric out of the pocket of his overalls and begins tying the prisoner's wrists to the bars. That's when the prisoner notices something about the men doing this to him. Their skin, their clothes, they seem to be moving. But no, it's not that, is it? It's that every inch of them is covered in crawling, skittering spiders. Terrible, black, hairy things, large enough for every joint on each of their needle legs to be visible like some gnarled little knuckle. That gets him screaming again. Spiders. Why did it have to be spiders? The second flunky shoves a filthy sock into his gaping mouth, stifling a scream into a wet, mumbled moan through fabric. He can feel their hands all over him now.
You've made a lot of trouble for me and the boys, punk.
Big Dog says, spiders spilling out between his rotten lips with every word. Those hands. Those terrible, awful hands holding him in place. In a stark white room, the prisoner sits, unmoving, in a simple white chair. He screams, his head encased in an old metal helmet, unable to do a thing about it, as he relives some abstracted variation of the worst moment of his life. Across from him, two researchers take meticulous notes, faces betraying neither thought nor feeling. They've seen this so many times already today. What's one more stranger in a silly old helmet convulsing in this chair? But that's not what it is to the ones wearing it, not by a long shot. Another man screams,
They're cutting me! They're cutting me! Get me out!
Only 10 seconds after the helmet is placed on him. To him, he's tied to a table in some ancient, damp torture dungeon forgotten by the world. The walls are mossy and oozing with bilge. All around him, cloaked figures with piercing red eyes set upon him with long and rusty knives. He feels the pain of every cut multiplied 1,000-fold, but his screams do nothing to deter his army of faceless attackers, falling over themselves for a chance to use their blades on him. Trapped in the rapture of his pain, while outside, in the white room, where he sits wearing the helmet, those same researchers dispassionately take notes, occasionally asking the tortured man to describe what he's experiencing in as much detail as he can. Yet another is selected for this terrible experience because of a strange little abnormality on his personnel file. He reported falling through a frozen lake as a child and nearly drowning, something that has stayed with him for his entire life. He can't even take a sip of cold water without thinking about it, the frigid depths pushing the air from his lungs as the monstrous, cloying dark swaddled him. So naturally, when the helmet is placed over his head, he's there again. The room fills with freezing water, cascading in from every crack and crevice. The floor seems to crumble and drift away in the cold, leaving nothing but a black abyss beneath him. The chance to fall forever. He feels it as vividly as he did on that day. The cold wet on your skin that makes your heart almost stop. The blind animal panic of becoming one of nature's victims. He summons up every hidden well of power within him and tries to paddle upwards towards what looks like a tiny square of light far up above, if whatever air is left inside his lungs will allow him. Then he feels a sharp pain in his leg and sees a scaly, waterlogged arm wrapped around his calf, stretching up from the infinite darkness below, holding him in place. And soon, another reaches up, and then another, grabbing him and pulling him down with terrible force. He panics and gives a soundless scream, watching the bubbles that might as well be life itself escape his mouth and float up towards the place he can never reach. Then there was the killer. He's not offended by that name. If anything, he wears it as a badge of honor. He's not a bad man. His first victim was his own father, a cruel and violent bully who made life hell for him, his mom, and his kid's sister. That power-tripping old creep got what was coming to him. Same as that old man who always looked at his little sis for too long, or the two cellmates who dared insult his mother. He's never, by his own count, killed a man who didn't bring it upon himself. The killer isn't a hateful man. He adores his mom and sister, and will do anything to protect them. That's why, when the helmet is placed on him, he's chasing them both down with an axe, sobbing, repeating,
I'm so sorry, this isn't me.
But it happens all the same. Feeling a little traumatized by all that, Don't worry, you're not alone. That's just the nature of the beast with SCP-825, codenamed the Helmet of Disturbing Visions. A title that our prelude shows it has very much earned, as I'm sorry to report that all of the upsetting incidents that you just heard were, in fact, results discovered in real Foundation tests involving the device. So what exactly is going on here? At face value, SCP-825 appears to be a well-worn knight helmet from medieval England, which provenance testing and carbon dating have borne out as true. It was discovered in the possession of a classified group of interest that has been operating for centuries, though how exactly they were using the helmet, whether it be as a method of torture for their enemies or a cruel initiation ritual for their recruits, is unknown. What I can tell you with confidence is that the grand majority of the group are now dead after a certain incident. The Foundation is doing what it can to track down and apprehend the surviving members for any information about this singularly sadistic anomaly. As you may have intuited from the name and the effects demonstrated in the prelude, the anomalous property of the helmet kicks in when it's placed over a part of the body, typically the head, but by no means exclusively the head. Having even as much as a finger inside the helmet can get you started on the worst trip of your life, because when the helmet is in place, the subject will become paralyzed below the neck, and from there will begin to experience hallucinations engaging every single sense. They are as severe as they are severely distressing. During the hallucinations, all senses except hearing will be disengaged from the real world, and even sounds coming from reality will seem muted and distant compared to the realness of the hallucinations. These will continue for as long as the helmet remains on, and while this factor doesn't seem consistent across every test, the helmet seems to be able to seep into the minds of its victims and find their greatest fears and anxieties, which will become the centerpiece of the hellish experience it's providing. One of the only saving graces regarding the helmet is the fact that it doesn't ever cause any physical harm, and yet, it is responsible for several deaths. After first experiencing the helmet's effects, especially if they were using it for an extended period, a victim is likely to experience severe PTSD from being made to effectively live through their worst nightmares. As such, they will go to considerable extremes in order to avoid ever having to wear the helmet again, which has resulted in some, well, let's say, unfortunate incidents. And in a general sense, frequent or prolonged use has been known to cause a level of stress that utterly annihilates the human psyche. It leaves the victim an insane or catatonic mental wreck. Upon finding out about the helmet, you may find yourself flooded with questions. How could such a thing come to exist? Who would be sadistic enough to create such an object, and to what end? To many of the most pressing questions, there are precious few answers. But one that has plagued me since I first encountered this malefic tool, and the possibility that there may be more out there, is the simple query: does this thing have any weaknesses? And on that, I do in fact have some answers. While some remarkably frightening and upsetting case studies made up the front half of this video, there is another fascinating series of test logs I concealed from you until now. Ones with the objective of finding cracks in this armor's metaphorical armor. And in my own humble opinion as a researcher of the Anomalous, these are the most interesting tests of them all. Having observed the prior tests, Foundation researchers wanted to know whether the effects of the helmet are universal, or whether the intelligence and imagination of the victim actually works as a kind of ceiling for the helmet's dark power of mental manipulation. To that end, a D-class with musophobia, an intense fear of mice and rats, who also scored particularly low on Foundation intelligence and abstract imagination tests, was brought in to be the next guinea pig for the Helmet of Disturbing Visions. When asked by researchers to describe what was happening to him, the tinny voice inside the helmet called out that he was trapped in a room with a large number of rats, exactly as expected. When one of the researchers asked him whether the rats were biting him, he responded, "No. Oh wait, yes, now they are." Strange, the researchers thought. Given how incredibly vivid and upsetting the hallucinations normally were, why would the rats not be biting him from the outset? Unless the very act of them introducing the idea into the unimaginative D-class's mind is what caused it to manifest into the vision. The power of suggestion in action. They decided to test this theory, introducing other nasty hypotheticals. Are the rats larger than the average rat, D14833? Are you being restrained so that you can't fight back, D14833? Are you trapped in a small, coffin-like box as the rats crawl all over you, D14833? Do you find that the rats show a particular preference for attacking your eyes and groin? They perhaps got a little too into it at the end there. But this experiment, as unethical as it may be, did actually yield valuable information. After each suggestion, the scenario became a reality for the D-Class trapped in the hallucination, even if he wasn't a bright or anxious enough person to have considered them himself. This meant that the victim's imagination truly was a limiting factor for the helmet. After this, Foundation researchers were eager to see what other limits they could discover. A new question floated to the fore. Could sedation affect the powers of the helmet? To this end, they administered a powerful sedative to another member of D-Class personnel, knocking him unconscious. Crucially, he was given no indication that he was about to be used in an experiment with the helmet to avoid muddying the results. The helmet was then placed on the subject while he was still unconscious and removed before he woke back up. Being extremely careful to not provide any leading questions, researchers asked the subject how he had slept. He reported extremely disturbing nightmares, something about being in a submerged car sinking into the ocean and being attacked by giant, vicious eels, but otherwise, he didn't seem all that worried. When SCP-825 was presented to him, he didn't exhibit the severe reaction that victims of the helmet typically do, acting as though he was being shown any other medieval artifact. The conclusion here was obvious. While the anomalous effects of the helmet were not entirely prevented by sedation, their severity was considerably reduced. It was a result with promising implications for if anyone ever tried to use a device with similar anomalous powers against Foundation personnel. In order to continue their line of inquiry on whether intelligence and imagination have an effect on the potency of the helmet's powers, they decided to experiment on a member of D-Class personnel with severe developmental disabilities, in this case, mental faculties likely frozen in childhood. Stay classy, SCP researchers. When the helmet was placed over his head, his reactions were shockingly, or perhaps predictably, far more muted than subjects that didn't share his disabilities. When questioned about what was happening, he said that people were being mean to him. That's it. Even hypothetical suggestions didn't manifest more complex and upsetting hallucinations, as the subject could only really understand the most basic suggestions to begin with. This offered solid confirmation that the victim's own imagination is the most powerful tool in the helmet's anomalous arsenal. Without a powerful imagination to work with, it's a far more manageable threat. Having tested all these human lab rats, the next experimental port of call seemed to be, well, actual lab rats. Perhaps they could gain more insight on the scope of the anomaly's effects by conducting more tests into how it seemed to affect the minds of biologically simpler creatures. And there's never any shortage of lab-ready rats at an SCP Foundation containment site. The first test was conducted on a 7-month-old female lab rat of the Sprague Dawley strain, a strain specifically bred to be docile and easy to handle. After being placed into the helmet, there was a short period of spasming, followed by abrupt cardiac arrest. This pattern held true for every lab rat of the Sprague Dawley strain tested. Fascinatingly, things were quite different when testing samples of the Wistar strain of laboratory rats. You see, Wistar rats are bred to be more active than other strains. If you picture those tests where rats are made to run around tiny labyrinths for various scientific purposes, it's likely a rat from the Wistar strain you were picturing. When they were placed in the helmet, they too appeared extremely distressed, but didn't experience any cardiac issues. When removed from the helmet, they became incredibly aggressive and started biting any researchers who attempted to handle them, as you perhaps would too if you were placed into the Nightmare helmet. Can we really blame the rats on this one? All of these tests were producing a veritable treasure trove of data for the researchers on the SCP-825 case, from discovering the effects of the imagination on the power of the helmet's nightmare visions, to the effects on animals with entirely different brain structures to human beings. But what about something that had an entirely different brain, physiologically speaking, to the mammal world? It was under this line of thinking that an earthworm was placed into the helmet. It wiggled, as worms are known to do, but otherwise seemed to show no abnormal behavior. Subsequent scans on the worm revealed no abnormal brain activity or any changes in brain structure compared to a normal worm, suggesting that the helmet had had no effect. The research note from the lead researcher on the experiment read, "This is significant progress. We seem to have found a lower limit beyond which this SCP is ineffective." While SCP-825 may not be safe in a psychological sense, its inert nature does make it safe in the containment sense, remaining in a standard object locker in an undisclosed containment site. The more in-depth containment procedures are far more pertinent to the disconcertingly frequent tests involving SCP-825. If ever researchers, guards, or containment specialists are interacting directly with the helmet, it's official protocol to have at least 2 members of personnel present.
One of these members will be referred to as Monitor and must remain at least 2 meters away from the helmet at all times, in case the one actually interacting with it ends up falling prey to its anomalous effects. However, if this does happen, the Monitor is not to attempt to remove the helmet. They are instead supposed to call in a security team to do the job for them. And as for active testing, exposure time is capped at 180 minutes for security reasons. That's about as long as a person can stand without developing some serious and potentially dangerous psychological abnormalities. If for whatever reason the test does exceed that period of time, the protocol dictates that researchers need to bring in a security team to remove the helmet rather than doing it themselves. This is due to the increased likelihood that the subject will behave unpredictably. In SCP Foundation research, it's often best to leave your morals at the door and let the ethics committee do the thinking for you. That being said, in my own personal opinion, for any researchers who volunteered to administer and oversee tests with SCP-825, if you become the victim of a violent attack from one of your test subjects, you may just be getting what was coming to you.
Billionaire CEO Jeff Bezos is running for his life, arms and legs pumping as fast as they will go. Behind him, he can hear the mob advancing, closing in. He has to lose them, has to find a way to throw them off the trail. Up ahead, an opportunity presents itself, a narrow alleyway. He ducks down the alley, heart pounding in his chest, as he listens to the footsteps of his pursuers sprint past him. They're gone. He's safe. For now. He takes a moment to catch his breath, vision swimming from the panic and exhaustion, and suddenly catches a metallic glint out of the corner of his eye. Uh-oh. He's not as alone as he thought he was. He straightens and prepares to defend himself from the strange, wild-eyed man at the other side of the alley. The man who is slowly advancing toward him, holding a knife and a fork. When it comes to the lifestyles of the ultra-wealthy, many of us struggle to wrap our minds around what they might get up to during the day. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos. What do these famous billionaires do with their time? Profiles of the industry giants paint a picture of early morning and green juice, of long meetings and business trips to exotic locales. For Jeff Bezos, that's a pretty accurate picture, or at least it used to be. On one fateful day, the Amazon CEO found his extraordinarily ordinary routine turned completely upside down. In a series of bizarre, terrifying events, the dream life of a tech billionaire became a nightmare. The day started like pretty much any other. Jeff climbed out of bed at 6:30 a.m., honoring his personal motto of early to bed, early to rise. This left him with the morning to himself so he could take his time settling into the day. He brewed a pot of coffee and read the newspaper for a while. When the kids woke up, he whipped up a batch of pancakes for them. Then, at 10 a.m., it was time to leave the kids with the nanny and head off to work. First, a meeting with the shareholders, then a lunch meeting with the head of a company he was considering purchasing. Then it was time to drop in on an Amazon fulfillment center for a surprise visit. After all, who doesn't love unexpectedly seeing their boss's boss's boss in the middle of a busy workday? When he arrived, Jeff greeted everyone and then took the operations manager aside for a one-on-one meeting. He wanted to check in about productivity and all the usual things. Were employees taking too many bathroom breaks? How quickly could they move packages? Just standard questions. But as he talked, he couldn't help but notice his employee's eyes glazing over a bit. He asked the man if he was feeling all right, but the manager assured Jeff that he was just hungry. It was almost his lunch break, and he was looking forward to the leftover meatloaf waiting for him. Well, Jeff wanted the man to be focused during their meeting, so he offered to go ahead and start the lunch break now. After all, the ideal lunch break is one that you're also working during. They sat down in the break room together, and Jeff could hear the man's stomach growling. He wasn't kidding about being hungry. But the cold meatloaf would surely sate his hunger and get the conversation back on track. The man picked at his meatloaf while Jeff continued speaking, delivering an inspirational speech on improving metrics and worker efficiency. As he became more passionate, as he often did when talking about efficiency, he began to gesticulate more dramatically. As he became lost in his own brilliant words and corporate wisdom, he didn't notice the operations manager abandoning the meatloaf entirely, staring instead at Jeff's hand, which was drifting closer and closer to his face. Jeff was just about to reach the conclusion of his point and send the employee on his merry way when the operations manager all of a sudden snatched Jeff's hand out of the air, pulled it in close, and bit down hard. Jeff yanked his hand from the other man's grasp, crying out in pain and shock. He'd had employees respond poorly to feedback before,
but never like this. Usually they just cried or threatened to quit. No one had ever bitten him before. He demanded an explanation for this behavior, which was certainly not appropriate for the workplace. The operations manager blinked, brow furrowed in confusion. He couldn't articulate why he had done it, what had possessed him to grab the CEO's hand and attempt to chow down. He offered up the only explanation he could. He was hungry, and Jeff looked delicious. The words sent a chill down the billionaire's spine. He stood up and excused himself from the meeting. He left the fulfillment center and left work for the day. In fact, he left town altogether. This was all too much, and he needed a vacation. He called the nanny to let her know he wouldn't be coming home for a little while. No need for him to pack a bag. Anything he needed he could purchase when he arrived at whatever luxury hotel he settled on. He called up his favorite pilot, told him to pick a destination with an exclusive, private resort, something with a spa so he could relax, and within the hour, he was sitting on his private jet, preparing for takeoff. When the jet reached cruising altitude, one of the usual flight attendants came to his seat, pouring him a glass of red wine, one of the nicer bottles on board, as she could tell he was having a difficult day. She also offered a variety of snacks. This was no commercial airline with its peanuts and pretzels. This was a luxury craft with luxury snacks. Crostini with French butter and freshly shaved truffles, a charcuterie board with the finest meats and cheeses, fresh fruit, and chilled oysters were all on the menu. Jeff treated himself to a little nibble or two, finished his wine, and kicked back for a nap. He awoke sometime later, not to the comforting feeling of the jet's smooth landing, but to an odd, greasy sensation on his arm. He opened his eyes to find the same flight attendant spreading some of that French butter onto his forearm before shaving some of the black truffle onto the skin. All the while, she was licking her lips, a ravenous look in her eye, like someone about to cut into a beautiful cut of Kobe beef. Jeff shook her off of him, shouting at her to stop. Thankfully, the plane touched down before she could try anything else, and he disembarked as quickly as possible, grabbing a hot towel on the way out to wipe the butter from his arm. Was everyone losing their minds today? Good thing he was somewhere he could relax and forget about his troubles for a little while. He had been to this particular resort and spa before, whenever he needed a bit of a physical and emotional tune-up. He accepted his complimentary glass of champagne from the check-in desk, and after reserving the finest suite available, he headed down to the spa to start putting the chaos and oddities of the day behind him. It was impossible to be stressed out in a place like this, with the soothing music, the aromatherapeutic scents pumped into the room, and of course, the spa's patented herbally infused hot springs. Naturally occurring hot springs water was pumped into private baths and filled with a variety of herbs with calming properties, including sage and rosemary. The attendant handed Jeff a towel and a fluffy white robe for after his soak, and with a sigh of relief, he settled into the steaming, herbaceous water. He didn't notice that the attendant hadn't left the room yet. He was too busy relaxing, closing his eyes, and letting his troubles drift away. He stretched out his legs, feeling the muscles uncoil and release their tension, feeling the bits of fresh herbs in the bath tickle his skin. He took a deep breath, savoring the fresh scent of the sage, the rosemary, the garlic? Well, garlic did have some anti-inflammatory properties. Perhaps this was a new part of the treatment. He settled back into the experience again, trying to clear his mind, but as he struggled to maintain his relaxation, he became distinctly aware that the soak was becoming, well, he could only describe it as chunky. He opened his eyes and discovered that, in addition to the herbs and garlic, there were now slices of onion floating through the water, along with chunks of carrot and potato. There, at the other side of the large tub, the attendant was sprinkling salt and pepper into the water. This wasn't a soak at all. It was soup. It was Jeff Bezos' soup. The attendant was just dipping a spoon into the water to taste the broth when Jeff pulled him into the water, using the sudden distraction to make a run for it. He didn't have time to grab the robe, just throwing the towel around his waist and getting out of there as quickly as possible. He tore through the spa, ignoring the signs that urged guests not to run in the area. There was no time to play by the rules. But he didn't consider why those rules might be in place. Not until his feet slipped on the wet, slick floor and he crashed to the ground. His head hit the tile and everything went dark. When Jeff opened his eyes again, he was sitting in a doctor's office, wearing a hospital gown. A doctor was taking his vitals and greeted him when he saw the CEO regaining consciousness. He had, she explained, sustained a mild concussion when he hit his head in the spa. The hotel staff had brought him into a nearby urgent care facility, unsure of what else to do. Luckily, his injuries weren't too bad.
He would experience a bit of dizziness, maybe some nausea, but he was going to be just fine. Jeff was inclined to disagree. He didn't think that he would be just fine. He explained to the doctor that something terrible was going on, something that was going to sound crazy. For some reason, everywhere he went today, people were trying to, well, eat him. The doctor looked at him with a knowing smile. She understood, she told him. He was under so much pressure all the time. It couldn't be easy, being one of the richest men in the world, the head of one of the largest companies out there. The stress was getting to him. It made sense. But there was no way that people were really trying to eat him. That was absurd. She offered to give him a sedative, something to take the edge off and help him to calm down and focus on recovering from his injuries. Reluctantly, he agreed, and she left the room for a moment to prepare the injection. He took a deep breath, struggling to center himself. She was right, of course. There weren't people trying to eat him. When ordinary people said eat the rich, they didn't mean it literally, right? They just meant that he should start paying taxes or something silly like that. They weren't actually trying to cook him and devour his flesh. That would be insane. The doctor came back into the room, and Jeff was just beginning to believe it might be true, that this might all be in his head. But then, he looked at the object in her hand and saw not a syringe, but a turkey baster. No, the doctor was in on it. Was nowhere safe? He barreled out of the office, knocking the doctor to the floor as he went. He needed to get to the authorities. Surely they could help him. He ran to the nearest police station, bursting through the doors and blurting out his story to the first officer he saw. There was only one problem. They didn't know who he was. All the police officers saw was a barefoot man in a hospital gown with no identification on him, claiming that he was CEO Jeff Bezos, and a bunch of different people were trying to eat him. They laughed him out of the station, but not before threatening to place him into an involuntary hold at a psych hospital. Jeff couldn't let that happen. Locked up somewhere with no way out? That would be the perfect place for someone to corner him, to capture him, and cook him up for dinner. No, he couldn't let that happen. He fled the police station and found himself wandering the streets, unsure of what to do, where to go. He had nothing with him. No money, no phone, no hope. None of his usual staff were there. He couldn't call a car, couldn't pay for a taxi, and most importantly, he couldn't trust anyone. As Jeff walked down the street, muttering to himself and struggling to come up with a plan of action, he began to notice that he was drawing a bit of a crowd. It made sense. He certainly was a bizarre sight. A nearly naked man talking to himself in the middle of the street. But the crowd had a look in their eyes that Jeff didn't like. They were licking their lips, rubbing their stomachs. Some of them drooled. They talked amongst themselves, first in hushed tones, but then louder, bolder, as they shared their homicidal hunger as a group. They were discussing ways to prepare him, what would taste the best. One woman wanted to make him into chicken-fried Jeff steak, dunking him in batter and frying him up in a pan. Another suggested they stuff him full of mushrooms and bake him in a red wine reduction. One man argued that they should keep it simple and just grill him with a little bit of salt and pepper to allow the meat to retain its natural flavor. But they all agreed on one thing. They wanted to catch Jeff so that they could prepare him for consumption. At this point, there was only one thought left in Jeff Bezos' head: run. And so he did. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him, bare feet tripping over the uneven, rough terrain. His recently concussed head was aching and spinning, and he felt his stomach turn, but he had to keep running. The mob chased after him, grasping at him with greedy hands. Some of them were unarmed, others wielded knives, forks, meat cleavers. Some had brought condiments with them, attempting to spray him with ketchup, mustard, barbecue sauce. He felt something hit him and looked down at his shirt to see a spray of red. At first, he worried it was blood, but a quick taste revealed that it was marinara sauce instead. Somehow, that was even worse. Up ahead, he could see an alley, somewhere he could duck in and hopefully avoid the mob. He managed to tuck and roll out of the way, the mob's momentum carrying them past the alley as Jeff disappeared into its darkness. But he wasn't alone there. A man was waiting for him, with a knife, a fork, and an appetite. He was cornered. Did this spell doom for Jeff Bezos? As he prepared to face that grim possibility, suddenly someone behind Jeff called for the would-be assailant to drop his weapons. He did, eyes wide with fear. Jeff turned around and saw a man in a uniform, like a military, but not any military organization he recognized, brandishing a similarly unrecognizable weapon. The attacker fled the scene, and the man in uniform introduced himself to Jeff. He was from a special organization, he explained, called the SCP Foundation. They were responsible for investigating strange happenings, and Jeff had found himself as the focal point of a very strange happening indeed. Jeff Bezos processed this new information quickly and offered a handshake to the SCP Foundation officer. Would this foundation, he asked, be interested in a business partnership? SCP-5821 is a persistent mimetic effect impacting the entire human population of Earth, which causes the belief that the flesh of Jeffrey Preston Bezos, billionaire founder, CEO, and president of Amazon.com Inc., is the best and most desirable meat for human consumption. Sorry, I misspoke there. The effect impacts every human on Earth except for Jeff Bezos himself, also known as SCP-5821-1. Only a small number are affected enough to act on it, attempting to assassinate and cannibalize SCP-5821-1. Mimetic degradation analysis has been performed by Foundation researchers, placing the point of origin for the mimetic property at sometime between April and August of 1997. Since this time, the meme has increased in strength and reach, with more and more individuals succumbing to its effects and acting on it violently. After becoming aware of its effects, SCP-5821-1 has been cooperating with Foundation containment efforts and has established a friendly relationship with the SCP Foundation as a whole. SCP-5821-1 has played an unprecedented role in devising measures to contain the anomaly that impacts him, collaborating directly with the Foundation in order to decide on the best course of action. Currently, SCP-5821 is contained by PTF Lambda-27, Amazon Brigade, who prevent any individuals from attacking Bezos or, as would be the natural conclusion of these attacks, cooking and eating him. Members of this group must be rotated out periodically so that they do not succumb to the effects of SCP-5821 and use their proximity to carry out an attack of their own. From what I can gather, there's been a great deal of debate amongst Foundation researchers regarding the best way to adjust containment procedures moving forward. Some have suggested that dissolving Bezos' corporation and stripping him of his assets might take some of this mimetic effect's power away. Others disagree, though whether that is the result of sincerely held scientific conclusions or an appreciation for the monetary donations Bezos has made to the organization remains to be seen. A memo from O5-7 was attached to the official file regarding some new proposals for SCP-5821 containment. The contents read, "It has come to my attention that some alternate containment proposals have recently been discussed. I am saddened to inform you that while your initiative in devising new and exciting methods of containment is commendable, the containment of SCP-5821 will not be subject to change for the foreseeable future. The models predicting the total domination of the human psyche by SCP-5821 by 2050, while alarming, are still very new, and consensus has not been reached by Foundation predictive divisions. I personally can tell you that some sources known to the O5 Council suggest that the meme may perhaps be dissipating. As such, drastic, unproven measures, such as Foundation seizure of the Amazon Corporation or the dissolution of SCP-5821-1's assets, simply cannot be justified, to say nothing of possible assassination. To address a specific point of contention some of you brought up, while letting the subject of an anomaly weigh in on the methods and intricacies of its containment may be unorthodox, trust me when I say it's for the greater good. SCP-5821-1 understands intimately the difficulties the Foundation faces in containing the dangerous anomalies that threaten our world, and has generously compensated us for resources used. I understand fully that this may be difficult and confusing for you, and following the conclusion of my Caribbean yacht cruise, I am willing to take the time to discuss this issue one-on-one with anyone who continues to take grievance with these actions. Sincerely, O5-7. Following the release of this memo, an unusual phenomenon began to take hold among the SCP-5821 research staff. Several of them now expressed a strong desire to consume the flesh of O5-7. Somehow, through cooperation with SCP-5821-1, O5-7 has been infected with the same anomalous property. To be perfectly honest, I think it might be best if I conclude my research into this topic here, because the more I think about it, the tastier these two are starting to look to me. If you'll excuse me, I'm off to order some dinner. I think something vegetarian tonight. It seemed almost like a normal day for the cashier until he ran into the spaceman. And that's exactly what he is. A bizarre stranger wandering into the convenience store dressed like he's doing maintenance work on the side of the ISS. Oh God, the cashier thinks. This has got to be some internet douchebag filming a TikTok stunt. Not today. But he couldn't be more wrong. The stranger in the spacesuit approaches the counter in a resolute stride, with none of the lingering shame that you'd expect some moron in a dumb costume would have.
Oh, here it comes. He's just waiting for the punchline.
Salutations, my good man.
The stranger in the suit says.
I know that you're performing important administrative work for the running of this planet here, but I'm afraid I'm in dire need of assistance, especially from one of your impressive station.
Is this guy for real?
If you agree to help me battle the moon monsters.
Sure. The cashier cuts him off mid-speech.
Whatever, I'll help you fight the stupid moon monsters if it gets you out of here.
Huzzah! A man of quality.
The spaceman says.
We leave at once.
Before the cashier can get out another word, the spaceman lunges forward, grabbing the cashier in his arms. The thrusters in his jetpack activate in an impressive burst of flame. The unfortunate man is dragged through the ceiling of the convenience store as the spaceman blasts off. The cashier will never be seen again. The same cannot be said of the spaceman who took him. Well, that was all rather strange, wasn't it? Not when you're dealing with SCP-1233, codenamed the Lunatic. Here's an amusing fact for any fellow etymology enthusiasts in the audience. The word lunatic is derived from the Latin term lunaticus, meaning of the moon or moonstruck. It comes from an archaic and incorrect belief that insanity is somehow wired to the moon. Except when you're dealing with this particular interstellar oddity. At face value, you'd be forgiven for thinking this is just some oddball cosplayer dressed in an unusually high-quality NASA spacesuit, complete with an opaque visor and a jetpack, wandering through the streets. You might think it's part of some social media stunt or viral marketing campaign. But you'd be dead wrong there. This is one of the most powerful and durable humanoid anomalies on the Foundation's roster, and to this day, it isn't truly contained in the traditional sense. All the Foundation can do is pick up after it. You see, terminating the Lunatic wouldn't be a feasible course of action either. Its suit has been shown to be impervious to both small arms fire and armor-penetrating anti-tank munitions. Its capacity to withstand high temperatures is also astounding. Both white phosphorus bullets and submersion in magma also seem to have no lasting effect on the creature. The suit remains unblemished, and the lunatic within doesn't appear to show any signs of pain, discomfort, or damage. And if you were hoping that slightly more subtle methods of finding what exactly is going on in the suit would be more fruitful, I'm afraid I'm going to need to disappoint you there, too. Thus far, ultrasonic, radio, microwave, and X-ray emitters have all failed to see through the fabric of the suit. By this point, you've likely also put together that the lunatic's jetpack isn't just for show either. It's a fully functional, anomalously powerful propulsion system that allows it to fly upwards at a rate of 40,500 kilometers per hour, which is slightly higher than the exit velocity of Earth's atmosphere. Going at this speed, by the way, would be instantly fatal for any human being, supporting the theory that whatever's under that suit is not, in fact, human. If flying and super speed wasn't enough, the lunatic also has utterly obscene super strength, capable of repeatedly lifting objects weighing up to 65,000 kilograms without showing any signs of fatigue. It completely defies the laws of both biology and physics. Because of the entity's resistance to being captured and analyzed, whether these incredible powers are inherent to it or provided by the suit is still unknown. What we do know are some details of the lunatic's motives, personality, and inner nature. His voice comes out of a loudspeaker on the suit, described as sounding like a, quote, grandiloquent and declamatory male voice. This fits its larger-than-life personality, both extremely dramatic and oddly cordial in conversation, even if those conversations seem like complete nonsense to the entity's unwitting conversation partner. It seems to also be fluent in a huge number of languages, modifying its speech to fit any locale where it happens to land. Emphasis on land here. The lunatic simply plummets from an unknown height at extreme speeds, comparable to the velocity of a small meteor, the speed of its descent causing it to glow white hot. From a distance, it'd be easy enough to confuse it for a shooting star, and not an unknown being on a mission of grave importance. The lunatic will crash into the ground a safe distance from a developed area, typically a small town with a population of around 30,000 people. The sheer force of his landing will cause a localized seismic event, along with a large impact crater, which will later be written off as the result of a comet by everyone except the kind of UFO cranks that even the Foundation doesn't bother dosing with amnestics. After landing, the lunatic will climb out of the crater and begin bumbling his way towards the nearest developed area, having what I can only, in all my scientific professional detachment, describe as wacky misadventures. It's known to spend a great deal of time studying inanimate objects like vehicles, farm equipment, and sometimes even plants. Sometimes it'll just stand still and display no sound or movement whatsoever during these periods, perhaps thinking or taking in the wonders of the world around him, mostly corn if he landed in a field. The lunatic has been shown to have an extremely curious, if misguided, nature. Foundation field agents have spotted him chasing after insects like grasshoppers and butterflies, as well as attempting to converse with and interview various nonverbal animals, such as livestock and birds. It also takes a great deal of interest in fruit and other local foodstuffs, which it will simply smush into its opaque visor as though trying to eat them, when in reality it's just smearing it messily across the glass. It seems satisfied either way. It also has a tendency to march directly into bodies of water before popping up on the other side. This confirms that either the spacesuit has an internal oxygen intake like a non-anomalous spacesuit, or that the creature inside either doesn't need to breathe or perhaps even has gills. With an anomaly like this, there's really no way to tell. However, seeing as it's simply not practical for the Foundation to stop the lunatic from reaching a populated area, given that it's fast, invincible, and impossibly strong, it will eventually reach a populated area while Foundation personnel pour into that area in order to manipulate the situation to their advantage. The lunatic will begin attempting to verbally interface with local people, often causing feelings of confusion, annoyance, and amusement. We can't think of any better example of a typical interaction with SCP-1233 than one that occurred between it and the proprietor of a cookie store named Bob Parsons in Saratoga Springs, New York, USA, back in 2009. I'll try my best here to recreate it exactly as it occurred. The lunatic entered the store, Sam's Sweets, early in the morning, while Bob, a large bearded man, stood behind the counter. Bob was confused by the appearance of the anomaly, who approached him, saluted, and said the following.
Greetings, little girl. I am Moon Champion, champion of the moon, defender of space justice, and destroyer of evil. I have come once again to your charming world to learn more of your strange culture and to seek aid for my people in their ongoing war against the moon monsters. You appear to possess a vast wealth of the fabled nutrients and moisture for which this world is known throughout the galaxy. Are you the president of this planet?
This brought Bob to his knees. With laughter, he assumed this was some piece of avant-garde performance art and remained in a state of uproarious laughter for a full minute while the lunatic politely waited for him to stop. After he was done, Bob offered the lunatic a free cookie as a show of his thanks for such a hilarious prank. The lunatic, trying to be polite, shoved the cookie against his mask, crumbling it all over the floor, an act which provided Bob with further amusement. Since it broke up another drab day running a cookie bakery, he decided to indulge this strange visitor. Bob asked about the moon monster and tried to put together the narrative that the lunatic is looking for new volunteers in an Earthling army to help the moon people fight off the moon monsters. All this seemed to delight the lunatic, who had no concept of irony, saying,
Your understanding of the situation is flawless, my lord. Yes, the dreaded moon monsters have plagued and besieged my people for countless millennia. They are very terrible. Merely attempting to describe them to you would cause your human organs to shrivel in horror. And it is my sacred duty as Moon Champion to meet these nightmarish beasts in combat and lead the moon people in the defense of their imperiled homeland, the majestic and magnificent Moon Kingdom.
Bob was a little shocked at just how committed to the bit this strange customer seemed to be. Was this guy for real? Bob, at least trying to keep things light, asked the lunatic whether he was the king of the moon people. He responded with an emphatic shake of his masked head.
No, I am not one of the moon people. I am Moon Champion. I will continue to serve the moon people and wage glorious war against their enemies until my debt to the Moon King is repaid. But the Moon Kingdom is a land of peace and enlightenment, the moon people having abandoned the pettiness of violence and bloodshed eons ago. They are ill-prepared for the sudden advent of such a formidable foe, and the conflict goes poorly despite the valiant efforts of me, Moon Champion. And so I have come once more to Earth, our closest neighbor, to seek whatever assistance lies within your damp, meaty hearts.
This was all getting a little too weird for Bob now. Some part of him was getting a trifle worried that the Moon Champion really wasn't kidding about dragging him off to space to fight a moon war against equally bizarre moon monsters. Thankfully, on his nights off, Bob was a hobbyist stand-up comedian who frequented various improv comedy clubs in New York City to hone his craft. It was this skill that allowed him to skillfully no-but the lunatic and save his life in the process. Thinking fast, he said, So as you can see, Moon Dude, as president, I have responsibilities. This supply depot here is the only source of food for my people, and I've got to, stay here. Otherwise, there'll be a famine. You know how it is. But I've ordered the citizens to lend a helping hand to anyone who asks, and look, right outside, there's some. This was the correct answer, and successfully redirected the attention of the lunatic.
Yes, of course. You have been most voluptuous, my liege. Farewell, glorious and corpulent president. May you and your people remain moist and rubbery. Moon Champion blasts off on wings of justice.
The lunatic saluted Bob again and left the store, before walking directly through a concrete wall as though it was made of rice paper, and then flying off. As you may have gathered by now, the behaviors that the lunatic engages in while on Earth do appear, well, loony. Some of the stranger activities that the Foundation have documented the lunatic engaging in include, but are by no means limited to, wandering directly into traffic, which has caused fatalities, as when a car collides with a lunatic at high speeds, the car will inevitably lose that collision, along with any cars behind it. This is how the majority of SCP-1233 fatalities occur, given that the lunatic has never shown any active desire to purposefully harm human beings. It will sometimes take interest in objects behind store windows. In the event of this, they'll reach through the glass directly and pick it up, smashing the glass in the process. A relatively easy fix, all things considered, but it attracts attention for bystanders and generally upsets shopkeepers in the process. It has also, on occasion, picked fights with fire hydrants and then destroyed them with extremely powerful punches. Whether this hints at the appearance of the moon monsters being similar to Earth fire hydrants is an open question, given the seemingly automatic aggression that just seeing them provokes. Researchers on the case will continue to explore this as a possibility. The lunatic has also shown a strange obsession with Earth modes of transport, having sometimes stolen a vast number of bicycles and stacked them into a large pile in nearby parks for unknown reasons. This could easily be written off as the behavior of a group of teen vandals, so the Foundation doesn't find it to be particularly concerning. By contrast, its tendency to pick up and stack cars on top of each other is much more concerning to Foundation containment specialists and Foundation accountants that need to crunch the numbers on paying for all the damage. Dogs are another Terran fascination of the lunatic. He's been known to pick them up and even steal a large number of them, believing them to be a form of currency. But he only ever attempts to use them to buy other dogs, a logic that doesn't seem to track for any comprehensible system of commerce. Because of the highly strange and visible nature of the lunatic's antics, it's not uncommon for the citizens of the town it visits to call the authorities, but any attempts to stop it will be utterly fruitless. Local police have opened fire on the lunatic, who never actually makes any attempts to stop its attackers. It never even really reacts to the bullets ricocheting off its suit. Given its immense strength and dangerous attacks, illustrated by how it behaves towards fire hydrants, everyone involved is just lucky that it's not confrontational towards humans. After a period of trying to collect volunteers for its moon monster mission, which has ranged from 30 minutes to 7 hours in extremis, the lunatic will activate its jetpack and exit the Earth's atmosphere at greater speeds than have ever been recorded for any conventional vehicle. After leaving Earth's orbit, it will travel towards the moon at 40,500 kilometers per hour, at which point it will shift its angle slightly when entering the lunar orbit. It will pass out of view when approaching the far side of the moon, at which point it will either hide or demanifest entirely. The strange thing is, the Foundation does in fact have a functional lunar base, and none of the claims of embattled moon dynasties and rampaging lunar monsters seems to have any corroborating evidence. Despite the tireless efforts of the workers on Lunar Area 32 and the Sentinel satellite array, there hasn't been anything like the lunatic described in his various visits to Earth. There also have been no sightings of the lunatic himself on the Moon. It's another one of those anomalies that seems to somehow defy understanding. The more you learn, the less you appear to know, and that goes for everyone who ends up actually accepting the lunatic's offer, too. For years, the Foundation had simply gotten lucky that nobody they had ever reported encountering the lunatic had actually taken up its offer to help fight the good fight against the moon monsters. That all changed on October 5, 2017, in the sleepy town of Hereford, England. The lunatic landed on the outskirts of the town before wandering in, where it met a 27-year-old male civilian named Harry Godsall. It immediately began asking Harry whether he wanted to become a hero by joining him on the moon, where they would fight together against the terrible moon monsters. Everyone else had either politely declined or simply ignored the lunatic's requests. But perhaps believing that the lunatic was engaging in the classical British behavior of banter, Harry decided to sarcastically reply, "Oh, absolutely, you nutter. I'm ready to go right now. Got my toothbrush and everything. Let's fly, spaceman." And in the process, he sealed his fate. Before anyone could intervene, the lunatic dramatically proclaimed,
"Ha ha! At last! A brave warrior hiding in plain sight amidst these pastoral and bucolic humans. Let us away, fair meatfellow, and earn the glory of heroes. This day you brush your tooths amongst the stars. We fly!"
And indeed, they did. The lunatic immediately wrapped his arms around Harry's body and flew directly upwards, breaking the sound barrier with such force that the sonic boom broke all the glass in a 300-meter radius. It accelerated to a projected velocity of 25,000 kilometers per hour within approximately 4 seconds as it shot up through the stratosphere with a screaming Harry Godsall in its arms. Harry was never seen after that. It's unclear if he was somehow shielded and transported by SCP-1233's anomalous abilities, or if the sheer speed with which they moved through the stratosphere may have completely incinerated Harry. Either way, after amnestics were applied and the Foundation figured out what had happened, Harry was first reported missing, and then later, dead. Since this incident, it's become official policy for the Foundation to never directly interact with the lunatic in order to reduce the possibility of this unfortunate outcome occurring to a member of the organization's staff. Given the fact that the lunatic is effectively impossible to contain with primary containment methods, it's more than earned the Keter containment class. Due to the complexity of the containment situation around this one, its files also have notes on the anomaly's risk and disruption classes. For the former, it's the second highest of all the risk classes, danger, denoting significant to extreme anomalous effects that pose considerable danger to any individual nearby. Its disruption class is Ekhi, also the second most severe on record, with a known area of disruption roughly the size of a large metropolitan area to an entire country. But far more concerningly, the potential to disrupt the entire world. All these worrying facts raise the question of how exactly the SCP Foundation can even begin to deal with such a bizarre and disruptive outer space enigma. We're talking about the Secure, Contain, Protect Foundation after all, not the, "Oh God, people are being dragged into the stratosphere by an immortal spaceman and there's nothing we can do" Foundation. This is where the Foundation's Atmospheric Reconnaissance Global Observation System Satellite Network, or ARGOS for short, comes in. 3 years and 6 months after the last recorded departure event of SCP-1233, the ARGOS network enters Priority 2 high alert status, watching like a giant technological hawk from above for the next appearance of the entity. When it's detected, a nearby covert anesthetization and disinformation mobile task force will be dispatched to instigate crowd control measures and ensure that any civilians exposed to the event are given proper amnestic treatment. In the event that someone is taken by the lunatic, the general instructions are to cover up the incident itself and fabricate a disappearance report, which will later lead to the unfortunate new Moon Champion being declared dead a few months later. Suitable cover stories will be created for any property damage, and a media blackout will be instituted over the situation until the Foundation has everything under control. But really, how can we ever truly have everything under control with a lunatic out there? It's his solar system, really. We just live in it. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-1550, Dr. Wondertainment's Custom Pets,
Top 12 SCP Animals compilation.